This video is brought to you by Against the Flow of Mississippi. Against the Flow of Mississippi is a book about Jake Fayard, a Marine veteran who is unhappy with the political machine running the state of Mississippi. He decides to fight the corruption from the inside. Jake will face more challenges than he ever has and will stand up for what he thinks is right. His notoriously hot temper will push him to the edge of murder, along with his friend and brother Kobe Barhanovich. Together, they will fight the system and give the power back to the citizens of Mississippi. Against the Flow of Mississippi is now available on Amazon. A link to the book will be placed in the description below.
Count time on the compound. All inmates return to bunks. Beyond the Count, Life on the Compound. Brought to you by former Sergeant Allen of the Florida Department of Corrections. On this YouTube channel, I will explain to you the ins and outs and the do's and don'ts of a prison. Hope y'all enjoy. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And if you are a brother or sister correctional officer, y'all remember, be safe and we never walk alone.
All right, y'all. Good morning. Another episode of Beyond the Count, Life on the Compound. Former Sergeant Allen, Florida Department of Corrections. Oh, just enjoying my cold morning. It's like, I don't know, 40 something degrees down here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast this morning, and yeah, it's cold, folks. I'm sorry, I lied. It's in the 30s. We usually don't get that cold down here, just but a few days out of the year. So maybe I spent too much time in Miami. I don't know. I can't take this. I can't take this too much anymore. Anyway, folks, um, I wanted to do a little bit more on inmate manipulation. This is something that I cannot stress enough. If you're going to get into corrections, I cannot stress this enough. But this is not about bringing in contraband. This is about um, really some of the things that you're going to hear from an inmate. One of the things that you're going to hear from an inmate when you're trying to enforce the rules of a dormitory or of the institution of the facility, you're the only one that does this. Well, Sarge lets us do this. Sergeant Smith said we can do this. Lieutenant Jones said we can do this. Let me tell you something, folks. As long as you are within your rules of the institution, and this is very important for a new officer because this is some of the things that they will try to do to try a new officer. Most facilities that I've walked into, and I've walked into, I can say that every institution in the state of Florida that is a state institution, and I can also tell you that the county jail I worked in here in Mississippi also has the same thing. They have what's known as an inmate handbook. An inmate handbook is something that they give the inmates to give them the rules and regulations of the institution. Some of the rules you may find not worth your time to enforce. We all get that. And I'm gonna get more on that later. I'm gonna get more on that later in the video. But there are rules for a reason. Okay. Rule number one might be something like follow the last order given, the last lawful order given. That's usually rule number one for any inmate. If Sergeant Jones on the last shift was in the dorm and you're a brand new officer on day one, first off, I want to point something out to you if you're a brand new officer. I don't care if you're day one on the compound and you're in a place like Florida where you will go to the compound for a little bit before you go to the academy and you're not a certified officer. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, you're a correctional officer. Period. Your job is to enforce the rules of the institution. That's your job. You are a correctional officer. I don't care. I don't give a shit if you're a trainee. Sorry if the camera bumps. I got my dog running around and he's a little puppy and he likes to play around. So if the camera moves, that's why. Um, but it doesn't matter if you're a trainee officer or if you're a 20-year captain. You have authority over those inmates. Those inmates are under your care. They are in your charge. You are charged with the care, custody, and control of those inmates. And if you give an order, I'm going to tell you, if I'm your sergeant, whether I agree with your order or not, I'm going to back you up. That's just all there is to it. You gave an order. Go play. Go. Sorry. Like I said, 2 weeks old and he is. Okay. Sorry about that, y'all. You're going to give an inmate an order. I'm going to back you up on it if I'm a good sergeant. Whether I agree with your order or not. Now, as a sergeant, if there are things that I don't care about, that I feel would be minor, and I call it, and then everybody else does too, picking your battles. I'm going to let you know, man, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't care about X, Y, Z, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. You follow your sergeant's lead on that because there's probably a reason why. Um, don't go in there trying to overrule what your sergeant tells you on that. But at the same time, you need to have that communication between your supervisor. You and your supervisor, y'all need to have that rapport. I'm going to get to more on picking your battles later. Um, but let's just say you see an inmate smoking. Now, most facilities, I know the Mississippi Department of Corrections, in state institutions, has okayed smoking. I don't know if they have it in designated smoking areas or not. I don't know. I didn't work straight for the Mississippi Department of Corrections. I can tell you that the facility in Mississippi I worked at was non-smoking completely. Obviously, I'm a smoker. I can tell you that every institution in Florida is tobacco free except death row. In death row, they have smokeless tobacco, Dept. Um, don't really agree with it, but my opinion is same rules should apply for everybody, but they have a reason to why death row inmates get certain privileges, and I may do a whole nother segment on that later. Um, in fact, I think I will do a whole nother video on that later. But if an inmate is smoking, you don't want him to smoke. I don't care what Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Smith and whoever else on the last shift said. If you say no smoking and they smoke, they're in violation of the institutional rules, and you have the right to write them a DR, RVR, whatever you want to call it. DR in Florida's disciplinary report, RVR in Mississippi's a rules violation report. You have that right. If they're in violation of the institutional rules, it's your job to enforce them. If you see open gambling, do something about it if you feel that it could be a problem. Now, on picking your battles. Again, I am very unconventional. I'll give you my pet peeves and I'll give you my battles that I don't really mess with. And the reason I don't mess with these is it's kind of hard to enforce when you're limited staff, and a lot of institutions right now are begging for people. They are wishing that they had help. One of the rules that I'm not going to go out of my way to enforce unless it becomes a major problem would be the gambling. And the reason is if you're in a dorm by yourself and you have inmates that are sitting there and they're playing cards. Well, how do you know if it's a friendly game with no gambling or if they're actually gambling? One way that you would know this is if they have canteen on the table. Now, if they're doing that, they're doing it blatant out in the open, I'm shutting that down. If I'm sitting there watching them throw whole shebangs and ramen noodles and kepi coffee and toiletries all on the table and they're betting this stuff, I'm going to confiscate it. And I'll let the inmates know that day one in the dorm. If I'm watching them do all this stuff, I'm taking it because at that point it's contraband. And gambling, not every inmate's going to have the money to cover his bets. So you may have to shut that down. Now, if they can keep it quiet and, as we say, be a convict about it, be quiet about your business, I may let it go as long as there's no problems. Inmates have cards. They're not, a lot of institutions, I don't think, allow them to have dice, though they will make their own. But inmates are allowed to have cards just about everywhere I've seen. And it's kind of hard if they're not openly throwing canteen on the table to decide whether it's just a bunch of guys, playing gin rummy, or if they're, betting. Dominoes is another big thing, especially in Florida. South Florida, dominoes is a cultural thing with a lot of Hispanic inmates. Um, a lot of times they're gambling on this. But again, if there's not canteen on the table, you don't really know. And they're not going to do anything in front of you. So as long as they can keep it quiet, they're not beating each other up, and they're not openly, blatantly doing it in your face, I don't really care. Um, One thing I will not tolerate, though, and this is a rule every institution I step into, I'll tell them I don't want to see your ass. If I can see the white of your undershorts, you're sagging. This is a pet peeve of mine on the street. This is a pet peeve of mine behind the gate. Pull your damn pants up. And this is for two reasons. Number one, PREA. You don't know what PREA is? I may actually do a whole thing on this because PREA is very important. It's called the Prison Rape Elimination Act. Basically, PREA was passed in 2003 under George Bush. It was passed to try to stop rape in prison. You know, we all know the cliches of, oh, you go to jail, you're going to give up the booty. That's the cliche of jail. Well, as correctional officers, we have PREA laws and PREA guidelines that we have to follow to prevent sexual assault, sexual battery, and sexual attacks on inmates. We have a lawful obligation to stop it if we can, or report it if we see it, or if it's reported to us. Well, we all know where sagging started. Don't act like you don't. Sagging your britches started in prison for the reason of you were available. I don't think I need to draw you a picture. If you're interested in being a correctional officer, you're watching this video, I'm sure you understand what I mean by you're open and available. Number one, when I'm on a compound, and this all is relative, when I address a dorm or a pod or a zone, whatever, I don't call them inmates. I don't call them convicts. I don't call them pieces of shit. I call them gentlemen. Now, I don't work female institutions. I have worked on a limited basis with female inmates, and that was in a county jail. But as a rule, I don't. I prefer not to work with female inmates. Too much of a liability, in my opinion. Again, going back to PREA, all they got to do is say I did something and I'm under investigation. Yeah, hard pass. Thanks. No. Um, but when I go into a dorm, I will address them as gentlemen, and I will let them know if it is my first day on this compound. I will tell them, listen, I call you gentlemen for a reason. I call you gentlemen because I expect you to act like gentlemen. And a gentleman does not sag his ass. A gentleman does not walk around showing off his booty hole. We all know what color undershorts you wearing. You don't need to show us. I'm hoping that they're clean. You don't have to show us that you ain't got no skid marks in it. Keep them pulled up. In doing that, and I will stay on this rule, I have actually noticed that it does make a difference in the way your dorm acts. If you go in there and you let them do whatever they want to do, you're not doing your job. You let them run around, if you let them, and I actually ran into this when I was at a New River Correctional Institution in Rayford, Florida. They had gotten into the habit in this couple of dorms that I'd worked in where they would actually get off their bunk, and I worked night shift. Most of my career was spent on night shift, and that's what I preferred. But they would get off their bunk and they would go from their bunk to the bathroom in their undershorts. And I know some of y'all just went, what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with it is, what if I have a female officer in there? Twofold way this protects the inmate by me not allowing that. Number one, if there is a female officer that walks into that dorm and happens to see that, she could get offended and say that they were gunning her. And they would really have no recourse because they're walking not properly dressed around the dorm. And when I say gunning, the term for gunning is, again, this may be just a Florida term, um, playing with themselves or exposing themselves to an officer. We call that gunning. Um, so just to curtail that kind of an accusation, and male officers get gunned too, but just to stop this from happening, I don't allow it. I will say no. You put some pants on, and then you go to the bathroom. If you come out of the shower area, you need to be. I prefer them to be, shirt, undershorts, pants, shower slides, whatever. I may let them get away with not having a shirt on, depending on what the institutional rules are and directives put out by the warden. But you at least going to be clothed from your waist down, completely, shorts or long pants over your undershorts. And again, that protects the inmate from an accusation, and that protects an officer from being gunned. Again, I know some of y'all went, well, you're worried about female officers. They chose to work in a male facility. That's true. That is very true. And I'm going to tell you, I've worked with some damn good female officers. I've had some female sergeants that I loved. Quite a few of them I still talk to, by the way. And I'm talking these women here better than some of the men I worked under. I would trust these female officers and female sergeants quicker than I would some of the men that I've worked with to have my back. So there's nothing wrong with a female working in a male institution. However, I will not stand up for I will not stand up for an officer, period, first and foremost, but especially a female officer, to be disrespected by an inmate. It's not going to fly. And there will be consequences and repercussions to deal with it. Just the way I feel, folks. I may not take it as far as a DR. I may not take it as far as, locking somebody in confinement, but there's going to be some consequences. And what works for me may not work for you, so I'm not going to get into that. And no, it doesn't involve me putting my hands on somebody. Use of force is a last resort. There's other ways to get your point across without beating a man to respect you. Sometimes it can be as simple as enforcing every rule and making them crazy because you do. And this is the difference between a convict guard, which is what I am, and a correctional officer. Some people hear the term convict guard, they kind of take it as an insult. Me, I actually take it as a level of experience, a level of pride. Because as a convict guard, I could always find a way to do something where nobody has to get hurt, but I get my point across. And it doesn't involve paperwork. Or I can come in here and I can be what I call a correctional officer and play Barney Fife and enforce every rule on the compound to the letter. Nothing flies. And if I have to get to that point, usually they've earned it. Usually they've done something to where I have to get that petty to where, let's say in Florida, I will enforce the 50 picture rule when I do my searches. And I will take whatever's after their first 50 pictures I look through, put in a property bag, write them out a property sheet, and I will send it to property, and they've got 30 days to have somebody come pick it up, which is a rule, by the way. That's one of the rules I don't enforce unless I have to get my point across. Now, This is an extreme rule, and again, normally I don't do it. In fact, I can't think of a time to where I ever have, just because I don't agree with it, and I think it's kind of stupid. But that is a tool that you can use, is enforcing every rule to the letter. And sometimes you need that. And let them know why you done it. Some people will call that retaliation. That's not retaliation. That's what I call it management. I call it, okay, apparently me being nice didn't work. Now I'm not going to be nice. When I do searches, usually if it's hard contraband, I'll take it. And there'll be some other consequences with that as well. DR, confinement, whatever. If I find drugs, you're going to confinement. If I find a cell phone, you're going to confinement. Either one of those constitutes a felony. That's an additional felony. possession of contraband in a correctional institution, possession of a cell phone, or possession of drugs and narcotics in a contraband or in a correctional facility is a felony. I have not been to any institution where it is not a felony. In Florida, it's a third-degree felony. That means that you can potentially be charged with an outside charge and prosecuted and have your stay extended. Now I'm going to keep you in prison longer because you had a cell phone. You might get an extra 3 or 5 years for it. You want to go home? You want to stay here? Well, if you want to stay here, don't have a cell phone. Let me find it. And I'm a cell phone hunter. I love finding cell phones. Cell phones every cell phone I find on an institution and get it off my institution protects the general public and protects my officers. They have the blue phones they can use, the Securus lines, or GTL, whatever. They have their tablets. They can send emails and whatever back and forth. These are monitored communications to make sure that there's not people bringing in contraband to the institution. Or they're not saying, I'm going to go kill this motherfucker because he pissed me off. Or, hey, go follow Officer Jones or Officer Smith home. I know he drives the black SUV outside. This is his license plate number. Go follow him home and, go blow him away in his driveway. Of course, that's an extreme. I haven't actually heard of that happening, but it's possible. That's what's going through my mind. Officer safety. Those are rules that I will enforce without any problems. Learn what works for you. Pick your battles. Again, what works for me may not work for you. If you feel that your control over your dorm is slipping, do something about it. That's your job. I don't let inmates run over me. This goes back to what I said at the beginning of the video. You're a correctional officer. You do your job. If your job states that you will do something, do it. That's your job. Now I want to get on to something else here. Some of the other things that you're going to hear. Um, One thing that you don't need to do, and I highly discourage this, is what I call selling tickets or threatening. You don't need just to make a threat. I'm going to beat your ass. I'm going to lock you up. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Took me a while to learn this. Speaking Florida, and I'm sure this is true for other institutions, you look at an inmate is just showing out. You as an officer, now again, me as a sergeant, I got a little bit more discretion on this, depending on the captain I have, or the supervisor, or the lieutenant, or whatever. But me as a you as an officer, you tell an inmate you're going to lock him up, going to put him in confinement for whatever he's doing. You can't make that call. It takes a captain's approval to put somebody in confinement, even as a sergeant. Now, where I was at Everglades CI in Miami, I had a very good captain. And my captain, if I told him this inmate needs to go to confinement, I would say 9.5 times out of 10, he went to confinement. The only time that he wouldn't is if there were reasons why he couldn't. When COVID come out, it was kind of hard to put somebody in confinement because confinement was full, or either maybe the inmate was coming out of a quarantine dorm, whatever. It was very difficult to make that happen. But most of the time, if I say, Cap, he's going to confinement, Cap would look at me and go, well, take him. Take him to medical, get him a pre-confinement physical, um, take him to, take him to confinement, change him up to CDC, do the DR, um, pack his property, write him a property receipt. I mean, it takes a lot to actually do this. There's a lot of paperwork involved. And if I lock somebody up, I've got no problem packing property. If I feel strongly enough that this inmate needs to go to confinement, I will pack his property. And I will separate what he's taken to confinement with him, his keep property versus his store property. I will do the paperwork. I will write the DR. And I mean, doing all this takes about an hour and a half, depending on whatever else is going on, because I still have a dorm to run. I still have to go into the dorm and do counts. I have to do security checks. Um, I may have to help out running the yard. I mean, there's other things that I may be doing on top of this. So I mean, it takes a lot to lock somebody up. But if I feel strongly enough that this guy's got to go to confinement, guess where he's going? If an officer comes to me and says, "Hey, Sarge, this guy needs to go to confinement," guess what? I'm gonna look at the situation. But as a supervisor, as a sergeant, 90% of the time, I'm gonna say 95% of the time, I'm gonna say, "Well, you think he needs to go? Hey, man, come here, turn around, cuff up." Yeah, I'll sit there and I'll help the officer with the property and help the officer with the DR. If the officer doesn't know how to write a DR, I'll teach him. Whatever needs to happen will happen. That's being a good supervisor. You know, if I work with an officer I trust and that officer has earned my trust, okay. He broke your rules. Did you tell him what the rules were? He knew the rules. 10-4, let's go. And he will be on his merry way. There's a difference between enforcing the rules and what we call jugging at them. When you go looking for trouble, you go looking for something to do, you can always find something to do. But again, you've got to pick your battles. You've got to know what is really important enough that warrants a certain action. Inmates out there gambling, but they don't have any canteen out there, and you know they're gambling, and they know that they're gambling, but they're keeping it respectful. Can you shut it down? Yes. Should you shut it down? Maybe. But while you're over here dealing with this, how do you know that you don't like that and that could be a distraction? Where something more serious that has your attention over here could be going on over here. You're worried about somebody sitting there playing cards, but you just missed 5 guys making a YouTube video. Now, which is a more serious charge? Somebody that's gambling that's going to get a DR that, they'll get a little game time thrown away, or something that, you know, they may be on the other side of the dorm doing drugs. Things you got to think about. And going back to jigging at them or provoking them, you got to see, you got to pick, you got to see what you're gonna do here. If you change your demeanor every day, they're gonna get confused. When I walk on the compound, I am the same every day. My rules are the same every day. There is no deviation in my rules every day. The only deviation would be if the captain says, hey, this needs to happen. Or if there's a new directive or a new policy or a new procedure or something comes down. Other than that, my rules are the same every day. They do not change. Unless I have to mold them, and I will explain this every day when I go into the dorm. If there is something to change, I'll let them know. Usually I catch them right around the first count of the shift. They're all on their bunks. They're all sitting upright. I'll look at them. Good afternoon, gentlemen. How we doing today? Everybody doing good? We got any problems in the dorm? All right, y'all, listen up. This is kind of important. This just come down from the warden, or this just come down from the captain. This is I know yesterday it was fine we did this. Today it's against the rules. I don't know what they're doing up there, or maybe I do know what they're doing. And if it's something I can explain to them, I'll explain to them. I do not lie to inmates. That is the other thing. I don't lie to anybody, but I'm not going to lie to inmates. But other than that, unless there is a reason for it, my rules do not change. Whether I'm having a good day or a bad day. I may do another video on leaving your personal life at home and checking it at the door. But y'all think about it. Y'all be safe. Thank you for watching.